What if I told you there's a commander that allows you to use your graveyard as a second hand, builds you an army of zombie tokens in the process, and that will accelerate your mana like crazy? Teval, the balanced scale. For 4 mana in Sultai colors, you get a 4/4 flying body with 2 abilities that look deceptively simple, but they will turn your graveyard into the engine that runs this entire deck. Whenever Teval attacks, we get to mill 3 cards, and then we are allowed to return 1 land card in our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And that first ability alone is already doing 2 things that this deck desperately wants to do. Self-milling us to fuel our graveyard, and cheating additional lands into play to accelerate our mana. Every single attack will push us further ahead on resources, and it doesn't require any setup beyond just swinging with Teval. And that attack trigger feeds directly into Teval's second ability, which is where things get absolutely crazy. Whenever 1 or more cards would leave our graveyard, we get to create a 2/2 black zombie druid token. And this ability doesn't actually care about how cards leave your graveyard. You can exile cards from your graveyard, you can use flashback spells, casting cards with the harmonize mechanic, reanimating creatures, returning cards from your graveyard to your hand, and even Teval's own trigger returning lands from your graveyard to the battlefield will trigger this effect. Now there is one little restriction you do have to keep in mind about this ability, because Teval states 1 or more even whenever you exile 5 cards from your graveyard with 1 single effect, you will only get to create 1 zombie token. But in practice, that limitation barely ever matters, because this deck is constantly moving cards in and out of the graveyard by using a dozen of really small effects, not just 1 big exile spell. And this is exactly why Teval works so well as the centerpiece of this deck. He's powerful enough on his own that you don't need to do anything special to make him work, but he heavily rewards you for doing what Sultai already does best: ramping like crazy, giving us access to incredible disruption and protection, and enabling some of the strongest graveyard synergies in the entire format. Because of that, I decided to build Teval as a graveyard toolbox deck. We'll constantly be milling ourselves, treating our graveyard as a second hand, and choosing exactly what we want to bring back from our graveyard depending on the current board state. Sometimes that means recurring lands to trigger any landfall synergies or just accelerating our mana. Sometimes we'll be reanimating high value mid-range creatures to just grind out the table. Sometimes we'll be creating a huge amount of tokens to generate an overwhelming board state. And sometimes we'll just be assembling some of the several combo lines we play in this deck. And I know, on paper that might sound like the deck is being built in many different directions. But trust me, after you finish the video, you will see that every single card in this deck synergizes with each other, and that there is one very clear game plan holding everything together. And I'll be honest, this might be one of the strongest decks I've ever built for the channel. It might even rival my Necrobloom list in terms of raw power and how fun it is to pilot. I also took the time to write a really in-depth primer over on Moxfield that breaks down every combo in this deck step by step. So if you really want to understand how exactly all the combos in this deck work and you want to go through it at your own pace, I'd highly recommend checking out the primer. The link is in the description below. As I do in all my videos, I will be going over every single card in the deck and explaining why I decided to include it. This video is divided up in 7 categories: the recursion and self-mill, the lands matter part, the acceleration, support, interaction and protection, the lands, and the combo section. And let's start by talking about the absolute backbone of this deck, the recursion and the self-mill. These are the cards that will fuel everything we're doing by milling us aggressively and allowing us to use our graveyard as a second hand. Everything else in the deck builds on this section. Heatron Crab, a cute little 1-drop creature that whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control will make target player mill 3 cards. It will trigger whenever we just drop a land. It will trigger whenever we do recur any of our lands with Teval. It synergizes really well with all of the cards that allow us to play additional lands per turn, and it has a really crazy synergy with fetch lands, allowing us to get 2 triggers out of 1 single land drop. And most of the time we will be using this effect to actually mill ourselves and just fill up our graveyard with a crazy amount of cards. Exploration Broodship, a 1-mana spacecraft with the station mechanic, meaning meaning whenever this card is on the battlefield on sorcery speed, we can tap any creature we control. Whenever we do, we get to add charge counters on this card equal to the tapped creature's power. Whenever we get to 3 or more charge counters, this card will function as an exploration, allowing us to drop 1 additional land on every one of our turns. A really good way to accelerate our mana and get additional landfall triggers. And whenever this card gets to 8 or more station counters, it will turn into a 4/4 flying creature that once during each of our turns will allow us to cast any permanent card in our graveyard by sacrificing a land in addition to its other costs, turning it into a really great recursion piece to just recast anything from our graveyard. And the fact that we have to sacrifice a land is actually a benefit for us in this deck because we will easily be able to recur it anyways. And getting this card stationed is actually a really easy thing to do in this deck thanks to all of the zombie tokens that Teval will generate us. You will instantly be able to use the zombies to station on the turn they come down. It doesn't even matter that they don't have haste. Gravecrawler, a 1-drop zombie body you can just recast from your graveyard whenever you do control another zombie. And since we will always be controlling these zombie druid tokens thanks to Teval, Gravecrawler is a 1-drop creature we can just keep recurring over and over again. And whenever you do decide to recast it from your graveyard, you will get a Teval trigger and an additional zombie token. As you will see later in the combo section of this video, Gravecrawler is a vital combo piece that enables a ton of sacrifice loops in this deck. Bloodcast, a simple 2-drop creature that whenever it is in your graveyard and a land enters the battlefield under your control will just return itself to the battlefield. And this card functions in a really similar way as Gravecrawler. It's a really cheap creature body that we can easily recur from our graveyard, and whenever you do combine this card with a sacrifice outlet, you will be able to generate a huge amount of Teval triggers and get a huge amount of these zombie druid tokens. And now that we're talking about sacrifice outlets, Altar of Dementia, a 2-mana artifact that allows us to sacrifice a creature and target player has to mill cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power. And this card does have a couple of really good synergies in this deck. It's a great way to sacrifice creatures like Gravecrawler and Bloodghast over and over again and turn them into a huge amount of self-mill. You can also sacrifice all of the zombie tokens that Teval generates you to this artifact to actually fill your graveyard. And you can use this card as an actual win con later in the game if you did manage to set up any of the sacrifice loops in this deck, or whenever you do have a huge amount of zombies available to you. Ripples of Undead. This 2-mana enchantment is probably one of the best self-mill engines in the entire format right now. At the beginning of your first main phase, you get to mill 3 cards. Then you get the option to pay 1 generic mana to return one of those milled cards from your graveyard to your hand. So both filling your graveyard over and over again every single turn and allowing you to just recur any specific card you might need from amongst those 3 cards. And whenever you do pay the 1 mana with Teval on the battlefield, it actually counts as a card leaving your graveyard and you will get to generate a zombie token. Life from the Loam, probably one of the most nostalgic graveyard recursion cards. For 2 mana, this spell will allow you to return up to 3 land cards from your graveyard to your hand, already acting as a really solid land recursion piece with all of the self-mill we'll be doing in this deck that basically will ensure that you will never ever miss a land drop. And this card has a really good synergy with all of the fetch lands we're playing in this deck, because you will just be sacrificing them over the course of the game, allowing you to just replay them again, get additional landfall triggers, and thin out your deck even more. Now that first effect in itself is already really solid, but the best thing about this card is the fact that it has the dredge tree mechanic, meaning whenever this card is in your graveyard and you do get to draw a card for any reason whatsoever, instead of actually drawing, you can choose to return this card to your hand and mill 3 additional cards, which will allow you to create a zombie token whenever you dredge this card because it leaves your graveyard. You will be able to keep reusing this card over and over again, and you will be filling your graveyard by milling a huge amount of cards whenever you do so. Agadeem's Awakening. For 3 black mana plus X, you get to return any number of creature cards with a different mana cost lower than X from your graveyard to the battlefield. Later in the game, whenever you are able to cast a spell for like 3, 4, 5 mana, and you do have a huge amount of creatures in your graveyard, you will be able to generate an insane amount of value. Now, even though Agadeem's Awakening is a fantastic card and has a really good effect, I wouldn't actually include this card in the deck if it wasn't an MDFC land. Because if you don't need this effect, you can just play the backside of this card, which is a land that taps for a black mana, and you can even make it enter untapped for the low cost of 3 life. You can essentially view this card as just a basic land card, which has a really nice effect that might actually win you the game if you do manage to draw this card later in the game. 6. A 3 mana 3/4 creature that whenever it attacks allows us to mill 3 cards and return 1 land card from amongst those milled cards from our graveyard to our hand. A really good ability to fill our graveyard even faster, get additional land cards in our hand, and whenever we do return a land, we will actually get a Teval trigger from it. And the absolute best part about 6 is its last ability. As long as it's our turn, all non-land permanent cards in our graveyard will have the retrace mechanic, which means we will be able to recast them from our graveyard by discarding a land in addition to any of their other costs. And as you can imagine, giving everything in your graveyard the retrace mechanic is just some absolutely insane recursion value. We will have access to any non-land permanent card in our graveyard to recast by just discarding a land. And we will always have lands in our hand anyways, either be it thanks to 6's own land recursion ability or thanks to cards like Life from the Loam. And as you could have guessed, whenever you do retrace a card, you will get to generate a zombie with Teval. And just look at the art of this card, it's absolutely beautiful. Look at the little burp on his finger. Absolute masterpiece. Blossoming Tortoise. For 4 mana we get a creature that has a really similar ability to Teval. Whenever it enters a battlefield or it attacks, we get to mill 3 cards and then return any land card from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. The biggest difference with Teval being that this creature will actually trigger whenever it enters and not only whenever it attacks. And on top of that, it will also reduce all activated abilities of lands you control by 1 generic mana. This will apply to all of the channel lands we play in the deck. It will apply to the Horizon lands. It even reduces the cost of some of our combo lands in this deck. And there are many more applications for this ability. Dread Return. For 4 mana we get to return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Now paying 4 mana to just reanimate a creature is already quite efficient, but the main reason why this card is one of the best reanimation spells ever printed is because of the fact that it has the flashback mechanic. Whenever this card is in our graveyard, we can just sacrifice 3 creatures. We get to cast a spell without even paying any mana for it. So it's a reanimation spell that will give us 2 uses out of 1 card. Even if we self-mill this card, we will still be able to use it and just cast it directly from our graveyard. And the cost of sacrificing 3 creatures really doesn't matter at all in this deck, because we will always have zombie tokens available thanks to Teval. Timeless Witness, the 4 mana variant of the classic card Eternal Witness. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, we get to return any card from our graveyard to our hand. And this card is included in the deck because it is one of the only ways to actually return non-permanent cards like instants and sorceries from our graveyard to our hand. Now, while most people prefer playing an actual Eternal Witness over this card, I really think this card is the better option for this deck. It will cost you 1 mana more, but in return, this card has the Eternalize mechanic, meaning whenever this card is in your graveyard, you get the ability to pay 7 mana, exile this card from your graveyard, and you get to generate a 4/4 zombie token that will have exactly the same enter the battlefield effect, allowing you to get 2 uses out of this card, enabling you to use this card straight from your graveyard whenever you milled it, and the Eternalize mechanic will actually generate you a zombie token with Teval. Overlord of the Baelmerg, a 5 mana creature with the impending 5 mechanic, meaning instead of casting this creature for the normal 5 mana cost, we can also cast it for 2 mana. When we do, it will enter the battlefield as an enchantment with 5 time counters on it. At the beginning of each one of our end steps, we get to remove 1 time counter, and whenever all time counters are removed, it will turn into a creature you can actually swing and block with. And whenever this creature enters the battlefield either as an enchantment or a creature, you will get to mill 4 cards and then return any creature card in your graveyard to your hand. A really solid effect for just 2 mana that will fill your graveyard and will allow you to just recur any of your value creatures. And later in the game, if all the time counters are removed from this card, it's actually a really massive creature body. Whenever you swing with it, you get to re-trigger its effect. And the last card in this section and the biggest body we play in this entire deck is Colossal Grave Reaver, a massive 8 mana flying dragon body that whenever it enters the battlefield or it attacks will allow you to mill 3 cards. And passively, whenever this creature is on the battlefield and 1 or more creature cards would be be put into your graveyard straight from your library, you get to put one of those creatures onto the battlefield instantly. With the huge amount of self-mill we play in this deck, the value that this card will generate you is absolutely crazy. Let's say in a single turn you get a Hedron Crab trigger, a Ripples of Undead trigger, and a Teval trigger. Every single one of those 3 triggers will allow you to mill cards, and per trigger you will be able to just put one of the milled creatures onto the battlefield. On the lower end of the spectrum, you can just hit some mana dorks and cheat them into play for free, or you can even hit some of the biggest creatures in this deck like a Crater Hoof Behemoth. Next up, we have the Lands Matter section. These are the cards that synergize really well with the sheer amount of lands we'll be milling and returning to the battlefield. This section ties directly into Teval's attack trigger, and it allows us to get an immense amount of value out of all the utility lands we play in this deck. Sylvan Safekeeper, a 1-drop creature that allows us to sacrifice a land on instant speed to give any creature we control Shroud, meaning it can be targeted by any spell or ability. Fantastic ability to protect Teval or any of our other value creatures from spot removal. And this card also is a really great unconditional sacrifice engine for any of our lands, which, as you will see later in the combo section, is really vital for some of our combo lines. Aftermath Analyst, one of the best uncommon cards ever printed. For 2 mana you get a creature that whenever it enters the battlefield allows you to mill 3 cards. A really good way to get additional cards into your graveyard, and for 4 mana and sacrificing this creature you get what is essentially a splendid reclamation effect, returning all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And as you can imagine, with all of the self-mill we are playing in this deck, this effect is absolutely crazy. Usually whenever you activate this ability you will be able to return somewhere between 5 to 10 lands straight to the battlefield, which will trigger all of their ETB effects. It will give you a huge amount of landfall triggers, and it will accelerate your mana by an insane amount. Wight of the Reliquary. For 2 mana you get a Vigilance Body that will get +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Now, due to us being a graveyard deck, this creature will usually be a 10/10 body, which is honestly absolutely mental for just a 2-drop creature. But the main reason why I love this card so much is its activated ability. By tapping this card and sacrificing a creature, we get to search our library for any land card and put it into play tapped, giving us the ability to just go tutor up any utility land we might need at the given board state. And the sacrificing a creature part of this ability usually doesn't even matter in this deck, because we will always have sacrifice fodder available to us in the form of Teval zombie tokens. A nice little trick you can do with this card is just attack with it first. It won't even get tapped because it does have vigilance, and then you will be able to activate its ability. Icestill Explorer, one of the more recent landfall creatures that is some absolute power creep, because this card is essentially a Crucible of Worlds and an Exploration combined into one card. It allows you to play an additional land, accelerating your mana even further and getting additional landfall triggers. It allows you to play land cards straight from your graveyard, which is just fantastic with all of the self-milling and all of the fetch lands we are playing. Every time you do play a land card from your graveyard, you will get a Teval trigger, allowing you to generate a 2/2 zombie token, and that in itself would already be enough to include this card in the deck. But on top of that, it even has its own landfall ability. Whenever a land enters a battlefield under our control, we get to mill a card, which is an ability that will give us an insane amount of self-mill for doing what we were planning to do anyways. Steward of the Harvest. Whenever this creature enters a battlefield, we get to exile up to 3 land cards from our graveyard. And for as long as this creature is on the battlefield, every creature we control will get all activated abilities of all the lands exiled with this card. And you can do some absolutely insane things with this card, especially because we will be controlling a huge amount of creature tokens thanks to Teval. If you exile a strip mine or a wasteland with this card, you can just tap all of your zombies to destroy all of your opponent's lands. If you just exile a basic forest with this effect, you will be able to tap all of your zombies for green mana. Exile a Lotus Field with this effect, and now all of your zombies will generate 3 mana. Now I know this card is quite controversial and it does have some sort of anti-synergy with this deck, because we actually want to have as many land cards as possible in our graveyard, and this card actually exiles them and we will never ever be able to get them back. That being said, if the stars do align and you do manage to exile a strip mine with a huge amount of zombies on the battlefield, this card will just win you the game on the spot. It might not be the best card in the deck, but it is a really unique card and it is really fun to use. The Gitrog monster. Yeah, we are in Golgari colors and we are playing a lands deck, so obviously the Gitrog is included. It's a 5 mana 6/6 death touch body that has some insane abilities for any land-based deck. First up, it does allow us to play an additional land every turn. A pretty good way to get additional lands out, but the real reason why Gitrog is such an iconic and absolutely broken card is its last ability. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to draw a card. And this effect will trigger from anything. Whenever you mill a land, you will get to draw a card. If you crack a fetch land, you get to draw a card. Cracking a strip mine will draw you a card. Discarding lands will draw you a card. The amount of card draw that Gitrog will generate you is absolutely insane. At the beginning of your upkeep, you will have to sacrifice a land to keep Gitrog on the battlefield, but this is actually a good thing, because whenever you do sacrifice that land, you will also get to draw a card of him. Izzy, Tyrant of Gyre Strait, a 6 mana body that will also allow us to play one additional land, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card. And this synergizes perfectly with everything we're doing in this deck, making it into one of the best card draw engines in the entire deck. Play and crack a fetch land, you will get to draw 2 cards, return a land with Teval, get to draw a card, or just crack your Aftermath Analyst, returning 10 lands to the battlefield, and you will get to draw 10 cards of this effect. If your opponents aren't able to deal with AZ and it does stick around on the battlefield, the value it will generate you is absolutely bananas. Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. Yeah, where should I even start with this card? It's a 6 mana Vigilance Reach body with its power and toughness equal to the amount of lands you control, which, as you can imagine, in this deck will always be a huge amount. And whenever Lumra enters the battlefield, you get to mill 4 cards and then you get a free Splendid Reclamation, returning all land cards in your graveyard straight to the battlefield tapped. And just like I explained when I was talking about Aftermath Analyst, this type of effect is absolutely crazy, especially with the huge amount of self-milling we'll be doing in this deck. And later in the game, for example, if you have like 50 cards in your graveyard, you can just use a Dread Return, reanimate your Lumra, you will get the ETB trigger, and the amount of lands you will be able to return to the battlefield will be absolutely crazy. And now that I'm talking about Lumra, it is the perfect moment to give a special shout out to Hoger. He is one of the most dedicated members in the Panzer MTG Discord server that has been around from the absolute start of this channel. He actually plays a C EDH Lumra deck, so when I decided I was going to build Teval, I asked him for advice. The amount of knowledge that this guy has on any type of landfall deck is absolutely crazy. He showed me a ton of synergies that I've never ever even heard of before, and he really helped me optimize this Teval list. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for that. Big love for you, man. And the last card in this section is Walking Closet and Forgotten Cellar. It's one of the Duskmourn Room cards, so whenever this card is in your hand, you can choose to either cast the left or the right side. And whenever this card is on the battlefield, you can pay the mana cost of the side you didn't cast to unlock it and also get its effect. The left side is essentially a Crucible of Worlds, allowing you to play lands from your graveyard, giving you some great recursion and a really easy way to get additional zombie tokens with Teval. And the right side of this card is essentially a Yawgmoth's Will. On the turn you do decide to unlock this door, you will get the ability to cast any card from your graveyard. You will be able to recast anything. Instants, sorceries, creatures, enchantments, whatever. Just be warned on the turn that this effect is active. If a card would be put into your graveyard for any reason, it will get exiled instead. And this ability is a replacement effect, meaning the cards will never ever hit your graveyard and they will go straight to exile, which means you won't get any Teval triggers of it. And once the cards are in exile, you don't actually have any way to get them back. Next up, we have the acceleration section. The cards in this section will allow us to get Teval out as early as turn 3 really consistently, and they will accelerate our mana like crazy and allow us to cast the biggest and most impactful spells in the deck whenever our engine is online. Birds of Paradise. Hands down, the best mana dork ever printed. Whenever you tap it, you get to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, allowing us to start accelerating from as early as turn 1, and it will really help with our color fix. fixing. And on top of that, you can actually use it later in the game to block any huge flying creature your opponents might control. Delighted Halfling. Another 1 mana dork you can tap for either a colorless mana, or you can tap it for any color, but you can only use that mana to cast a legendary spell. Whenever you do use the colorless mana this creature produces, that spell can be countered. A really solid acceleration piece that will also help you if you do play in a pot where a ton of counter magic is being played. That right, Shaman. I really like to view this card as a 1 mana planeswalker, because the amount of abilities on this creature is absolutely crazy. You can tap it and exile a land card from any graveyard to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, making it just like the previous 2 cards into a 1 mana dork. And since we are playing a huge amount of fetch lands and self-mill effects, you will always have lands to exile. Or you can just start exiling your opponent's fetch lands from their graveyards. For a black mana and tapping it, you get to exile an instant or sorcery spell from any graveyard, and that right Shaman will deal 2 damage to each opponent. And for 1 green mana and tapping it, you will get to exile a creature card from a graveyard and you get to gain 2 life. Now these last 2 abilities might not seem that relevant, but trust me, they are. Because if you are playing against any sort of reanimator or spellslinger deck, whenever they now want to flashback or reanimate a card from their graveyard, you can just tap your Dead Right Shaman, exile it, and they won't be able to do so anymore. And obviously you can also use these abilities on creatures and spells in your own graveyard you don't need anymore. And whenever you then have Teval on the battlefield, every time you do so, you will get to generate a zombie token. Mold Tender. Another 1-drop mana dork that will generate you mana of any color for exiling a card from your graveyard. If you don't have any cards in your graveyard or you just don't need the mana, you can also tap this creature to just mill a card, which will always give you a target for its mana generation and allow you to dig deeper into your library. Badger Mole Cup, the best card we got in the entire Avatar set. For 2 mana you get a creature that whenever it enters a battlefield allows you to Earthbend 1, meaning you get to animate one of your lands into a creature and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever an Earthbend land would die or get exiled, it just returns to the battlefield tapped instead. Now first up, I just did a deck on Earthbending and it is one of the most broken mechanics ever printed. Because let's say you have a Field of the Dead on the battlefield and you then play a Badger Mole Cup and Earthbend it, your opponents won't actually have a way to deal with it anymore. They can't destroy it and they can't exile it, it will just return. And whenever you tap any creature for mana with Badger Mole Cup on the battlefield, you get to add 1 additional green mana to your mana pool. And this will apply to the Earthbend land because it is actually a creature. This makes Badger Mole Cup into another way you can get a turn 3 Teval. Just play this card on turn 2, Earthbend one of your lands, and on the next turn it will actually tap for 2 mana. And it will also increase all the mana output of all the other mana dorks in this deck. It's one of the most expensive new magic cards, but trust me, it is totally worth it. The card is absolutely broken. Bloom Tender. You can tap this 2 mana creature to add 1 mana to your mana pool of any color of permanence you control. A card that both enables us to accelerate and cast Teval on turn 3, and later in the game whenever you do have Teval or any color permanence on the battlefield, it is actually a 2 mana dork that will tap for 3 mana, which is obviously some really good value. Fanatic of Veronas. Another 2 mana dork that will tap for a green, and it also has the ferocious mechanic, meaning whenever you control a 4 power creature, you can actually tap this card to add 4 green mana to your mana pool, which makes it even better than a Bloom Tender. Thanks to our commander having 4 power, we will always be able to get a huge amount of mana out of this. And this card also has the Eternalize mechanic, meaning whenever it is in our graveyard, we get the ability to pay 4 mana, exile the card, and create a 4/4 zombie token copy out of it with exactly the same ability. So even if you mill this card, you can still get a use out of it. Herd Heirloom. A mana rock that will tap for 1 mana of any color, but you can only use that mana to cast a creature spell. And instead of tapping it for mana, you can also tap it to give any creature you control with power 4 or greater, trample, and a new ability until the end of turn. The ability being whenever this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. So it will allow you to get Teval out on turn 3, and later in the game you can start using this effect on Teval to get additional card draw, which is pretty good for just a 2 mana rock. Nature's Lore and 3 Visits. Both cards have exactly the same effect and mana cost, but they do have a different name, so we are able to play both in the deck. Whenever you cast any of these two spells, you get to search your library for any forest card and put it into play. It doesn't even enter the battlefield tapped. And due to the way of how this card is worded, you can search for lands with the forest typing. It don't have to be basic forests. You can go fetch up a Triome, any of the Survey lands, any of the Shock lands. A really good way to fix your colors and accelerate your mana. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. Whenever this 3-mana creature enters the battlefield, you get a free growth spiral, allowing you to draw a card and then put any land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Some sort of a cantrip effect that will replace itself and allow you to accelerate your mana, but whenever Uro enters the battlefield and it didn't escape, you have to sacrifice it instantly, so you will get the ETB trigger, but then it will go to your graveyard. And like I mentioned, it does have the escape mechanic, so for paying 2 green and 2 blue mana and exiling 5 other cards from your graveyard, you can actually cast Uro straight from your graveyard. Paying the cost of exiling 5 cards for the escape mechanic will give you a Teval trigger and generate you a zombie, and then you will get another zombie from Uro actually returning from your graveyard to the battlefield. A really solid card you can use either early in the game to accelerate your mana, or whenever you did mill it later in the game, you can still recast it and get 2 free Teval triggers. Head Shredder, a 4-mana vehicle from the Duskmourn set. Whenever this card is on the battlefield and any number of land cards would be put into your graveyard from your library, you get to put them into play tapped instead. And this type of effect is just absolutely nuts with any sort of self-mill. Whenever you mill with Teval, Hedron Crab, Altar of Dementia, and you do manage to hit a couple of lands, they will just instantly go to the battlefield, which will generate you an insane amount of landfall triggers and mana. And whenever you do have Teval on the battlefield, for each land that goes from your graveyard to the battlefield, you will actually also get to generate a zombie token. And since this card is a vehicle, it also has the Crew 1 mechanic, meaning you can tap any creature you control with power 1 or greater to turn this card into an actual artifact creature. And whenever you then swing with this card, you get to mill 2 cards. An additional way to mill yourself and get even more lands into play thanks to its other effect. And thanks to Teval's zombie generation, you will always have zombie bodies available to crew this card. This card also has a crazy synergy with Hedron Crab. Let's say you have both cards on the battlefield and you then play a land. Hedron Crab will trigger and you will get to mill 3 cards. If amongst those 3 milled cards are any land cards, Head Shredder will return them to the battlefield, which will give you another Hedron Crab trigger and allow you to dig even deeper into your library. For as long as you do manage to keep milling land cards, this loop will just keep continuing milling yourself and putting a huge number of lands into play. Before we move on, there is something that I want to talk about for a minute, because this Teval video actually marks a really special moment for me. Exactly 1 year ago, I uploaded my first YouTube video, my Necrobloom deck tech, and this is where this entire journey started. From there on out, I decided to post one of these in-depth Commander deck tech videos every single week. And honestly, I never expected things to grow in the way that they did. The channel has grown way faster than I could have ever wished for. The community we built over in the Discord is absolutely incredible, and through this entire YouTube journey, I actually made a ton of really awesome new friends. I never could have imagined that I would form some new and really solid friendships with people all over the world talking about cardboard. So seriously, thank you for everything. For watching the videos, leaving comments, sharing all of your awesome ideas about the decks, and for sticking around week after week. The amount of support that I got from starting this channel till now has been absolutely unreal. And of course, a special thanks to all the current YouTube members as well. Thanks to your support, I can keep pouring all the passion that I have for Magic into these weekly deck tech videos. I'm really excited to see where this journey will take me in 2026, and I'm glad you're here for the ride. Alright, now that emotional blabber is out of the way, let's get back to the deck. Let's get into what is, in my opinion, the most interesting section of this entire deck: the support cards. These cards might not seem flashy on their own, but they do really improve everything this deck wants to do. Extra consistency, tutors, and key combo pieces that help everything come together over the course of the game. Amulet of Vigor, a 1 mana artifact that whenever a permanent enters a battlefield tapped under your control will untap it. The amount of value that this simple artifact card will generate you over the course of the game is just absolutely insane. All of your tap lands will now enter untapped. All lands from effects like Lumra, Head Shredder, or Aftermath Analyst will now enter the battlefield untapped, and you will instantly be able to produce a huge amount of mana. And this card is also used in some of our infinite combos in the deck. Tortured Existence. For 1 black mana, you get an enchantment with an activated ability. By paying 1 black mana and discarding a creature card, you get to return any creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And this simple 1 mana enchantment is the key that opens the entire toolbox that this deck is. Because thanks to its effect, you can now select any creature you have in your graveyard that you do need at a given board state, discard a random creature, get it back to your hand, and you will be able to use it to solve whatever problem you might have. And the best part is you can just keep swapping creatures in your hand and graveyard over and over again for 1 black mana. And every time you do so with Teval on the battlefield, it will generate you a zombie token. Absolute auto-inclusion card in any sort of Teval deck. Insidious Roots. This 2 mana enchantment will give all creature tokens you control the ability that you can tap them to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And this does apply to all the creature tokens we are able to generate, either be it thanks to Teval, Field of the Dead, or by using this card's other ability, which will, whenever 1 or more creatures leave your graveyard for any reason, will generate you a 0/1 plant token and then will put a +1/+1 counter on all plant creatures you control. So whenever you use Tortured Existence, a reanimation spell, or any other recursion spell, you will get to generate plant tokens, functioning in a really similar way as Teval. But this time the plant tokens will just keep growing bigger and bigger, and this card can really win you the game all by itself. And whenever you are able to generate a huge amount of plant tokens, you will also be able to generate a huge amount of mana thanks to this card's first ability, Finale of Devastation. For 2 green mana plus X, you get to search either your library or your graveyard for any creature card with mana value X or less and put it straight onto the battlefield. A fantastic tutor to go fetch up any of your value creatures or combo pieces, and the fact that it does allow you to even search your graveyard makes it into a perfect recursion tool. And whenever you cast a spell with X being bigger than 10 mana, all creatures you control will get +X and haste until the end of turn. So both a fantastic creature tutor and a really good mana sink later in the game to turn all of your zombies in like 50-50 creatures and just take all of your opponents out of the game with. Nature's Rhythm. Another creature tutor for 2 green +X that allows you to search your library for any creature card and put it into play. And on top of that, it also has the Harmonize mechanic, meaning whenever this card is in your graveyard, you can pay 4 green mana +X to just recast it again. And whenever you do cast a card with the Harmonize mechanic, you get the option to tap a creature you control, and you will get to reduce the cost of the Harmonize effect by that creature's power. And this card is included for a couple of reasons. Whenever you do mill this card over the course of the game, you will still be able to cast it from your graveyard. You will be able to reduce its cost by tapping Teval or any of your zombie tokens. It is one single card that allows you to get 2 uses out of it. And whenever you do cast it from your graveyard, you will get to generate a zombie thanks to Teval. Sylvan Library. One of the best card draw enchantments that green has to offer. At the beginning of your draw step, you get to draw 2 additional cards. Whenever you do, you have to put 2 cards that you drew this turn back on top of your library unless you pay 4 life per card. Now this card has a really weird wording, but in essence it allows you to draw 3 cards per turn for the cost of 8 life. And since in a game of Commander we start at 40 life anyways, we do have a ton of resource to work with. Ayara. First of Locthwain. Whenever Ayara or any other black creature enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and we get to gain 1 life. Now that effect might seem really out of place in this deck, but do keep in mind all the zombies that Teval generates are actually black creatures. And if Ayara can stick to the battlefield, it will generate you a huge amount of value over time. And as you will see in the combo section, we also do play a ton of sacrifice loops, making a black creature enter the battlefield under our control an infinite amount of times. Whenever we then have Ayara on the battlefield, this will translate into an automatic game win. And on top of that, we can also use Ayara to sacrifice a black creature we control, and we get to draw a card of that. A perfect sack outlet for your Bloodghast, your Gravecrawler, or any of your zombie tokens. Endurance. A 3 mana creature with Flash and the Evoke mechanic, meaning we can either cast it for its regular mana cost, or we can cast it for its Evoke cost, which is exiling another green card from our hand. Whenever we do evoke this card, it just enters the battlefield and then it gets sacrificed immediately. But we will still get its ETB effect, which is that we get to pick a player and they have to put all the cards in their graveyard on the bottom of their library. And since this card has flash, it is actually a really excellent way to protect your own graveyard. Let's say you have been milling yourself and you have like 50 cards in your graveyard, and then an opponent decides to play a Bojuka Bog and tries to exile your graveyard. You can then just flash in your Endurance, put your entire graveyard back into your deck, and no cards will be lost in the process. And Endurance is also a fantastic card to use against other graveyard-based decks. Let's say you're playing against a reanimation player and they're casting a Victimize trying to reanimate their Elesh Norn. You can just flash in your Endurance, put their graveyard back into their deck, the Victimize won't have a target anymore, and they won't be able to reanimate the creature. And thanks to the evoke mechanic, even though you're entirely tapped out and you have no mana available, you will still be able to cast it for free, which might really catch your opponents off guard. Formidable Speaker, one of the cards that will get released next year in the newest Lorwyn set. For 3 mana, you get a creature that whenever it enters the battlefield allows you to discard a card, and you get to search your library for any creature and put it into your hand. A fantastic creature tutor that will also allow you to discard a card that you'd rather have in your graveyard. And on top of that, you can also invest 1 colorless mana and tap this creature to untap any other permanent you control, which you can use to untap your Lotus Field to produce you some additional mana, or you can use to untap your White of the Reliquary and go tutor up even more lands. Laboratory Maniac. Normally, whenever you would draw a card and your library has no cards in it, you instantly lose the game. But whenever you do have this 3 mana creature on the battlefield, you get to win the game instead. As you've seen in this video, we do play a huge amount of self-mill effects, and you will easily be able to put your entire library into your graveyard. With a Labman on the battlefield, you will just instantly win the game. And as you will see later in the combo section, we do have ways to return Labman from our graveyard to the battlefield on instant speed whenever we are able to mill our entire library, including the Labman. Correction Altar. For 3 mana, we get an artifact that allows us to sacrifice a creature on instant speed to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. A fantastic sacrifice outlet that allows you to convert all the zombies you generate with Teval into actual mana, and also a really vital combo piece in this deck. Warren Soul Trader, a really similar card to Phyrexian Altar. By paying 1 life and sacrificing a creature, we get to generate an untapped treasure token. Another card that allows us to convert all of our zombies into mana. We can use it in all of our infinite combos, and this card has a really good synergy with Gravecrawler because it is an actual zombie. Baifeng's Bounty Hunters, a 4 mana creature that whenever a non-land creature we control would die allows us to Earthbend X. X being that creature's power. And as I already covered in really great lengths in previous week's video, Earthbending is an absolutely broken mechanic. So whenever any of your zombie tokens or any other creatures would die, we get to animate our lands. And from that point on, whenever we sacrifice our own lands or our opponents try to interact with them, they will just hit the graveyard and then instantly return to the battlefield. And whenever an Earthbend land does this and you do have Teval on the battlefield, they will hit the graveyard first and then return. So you will actually get to generate zombie tokens of it. Keru Goldkeeper, a 4 mana dragon that whenever 1 or more cards would leave your graveyard during your turn will generate you an untapped treasure token. And just like Teval, this card will trigger of anything. Reanimation, recursion, playing lands from your graveyard, or even whenever you cycle through creatures in your hand and graveyard by using Tortured Existence. Another auto-include card in any sort of Teval deck. Yawgmoth, Tran Physician, a 4 mana creature that is a fantastic sacrifice outlet. By paying 1 life and sacrificing a creature, we get to draw a card and put a -1/-1 counter on any creature on the battlefield. A perfect card to just start sacrificing all of your Teval zombies to, drawing you an insane amount of cards and clearing all creatures your opponents control from the board. The only downside to sacrifice outlets like Warren Soul Trader or Yawgmoth is the fact that you are limited by your current life total. But otherwise, these cards would be absolutely broken. Lotus Light Dancers. Whenever this 5 mana creature enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a blue, a green, and a black card, and you get to put those cards into your graveyard. Now, paying 5 mana to just get 3 cards into your graveyard might sound like a really bad deal, but the fact that you do get to pick 3 specific cards makes this effect incredibly efficient. Let me just give you a couple of examples of what this card can do. You can, for example, set up a stack of Dread Return as the black card, Colossal Grave Reaver as the green card, and then an Uro as the blue card. If you then have a couple of zombies on the battlefield, you will just be able to flashback the Dread Return, instantly bringing back the Colossal Grave Reaver to the battlefield, milling you some cards, getting some creatures into play, and then you will instantly be able to escape Uro from your graveyard, and you will be able to generate an insane amount of value in just one single turn. And another good card to pick for the green card is a Nature's Rhythm, because it does give you access to a tutor you can cast from your graveyard. Disciple of Realize. For 6 mana you get a creature that whenever it enters a battlefield allows you to sacrifice another creature. When you do, you get to gain life and draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. A really great card to cast in the late game to sacrifice a zombie token to generate you a little bit of card advantage, or to sacrifice a huge White of the Reliquary to actually draw like 10 cards. If you have this card in your hand early in the game, you can just play the backside, which is a land that taps for a green mana and won't even enter the battlefield tapped. And the last card in this section, and I already mentioned it, is a Crater Hoof Behemoth. A massive 8 mana creature that whenever it enters a battlefield will give all creatures you control +X and trample, where X is the amount of creatures you control. And with the amount of tokens that we will be generating of things like Teval and Field of the Dead, the massive stat boost that a Crater Hoof will give to all your creatures will just allow you to close out the game on the spot. Even if your opponents control a ton of 1/1 chum blockers, thanks to the trample, it won't even matter. And there's one card that I decided to not include in the deck, but I do want to give an honorable mention. And that is Guildleaf Archdruid. For 5 mana you get a creature that will allow you to tap 7 untapped druids you control, and whenever you do, you get to gain control of all lands that target opponent controls. And since Teval will actually generate us zombie druid tokens, this is a really easy requirement to meet in this deck. And just stealing all of someone's lands will just lock them out of the game, and it will give you a huge advantage. Now there are 2 reasons why I decided to exclude this card from the deck. First up, it does count as a mass land denial card and would push this deck into a bracket 4 deck. Now while I don't really use the bracket system myself, in my experience having my decks labeled as bracket 4 actually pushes a ton of people away from them. And the second reason why it's excluded is because it is just really weird to put your opponent's lands mixed with your lands. After the game you will have to check sleeve colors and stuff to just give their lands back, and honestly no one likes you using their cards. Next up we have the interaction and protection section. With a deck this strong you are going to draw attention really quickly. The cards in this section will ensure that we will survive long enough to take over the game with efficient removal and protection that allow us to protect Teval and disrupt any of our opponent's game plans. An offer you can't refuse. A 1 mana spell that will allow us to counter any non-creature spell on the stack, but in return the controller of that spell will get to generate 2 treasure tokens. Now usually those 2 treasure tokens really don't matter, because let's say you are trying to combo off with Teval and an opponent is casting a spot removal spell or a board wipe, you will be able to protect your combo for just 1 mana, and those 2 treasure tokens you're handing out won't matter anyways. Swan Song, another really efficient 1 mana counter spell we can use to counter any enchantment, instant or sorcery spell. In return the controller of that spell will get to generate a 2/2 flying bird token. And just like I talked about with an offer you can't refuse, the fact that you are able to counter any of your opponent's combo pieces or any of their board wipes or spot removal spells for just 1 mana is just absolutely crazy and efficient. Insidious Fungus, a 1 mana creature that you can sacrifice by paying 2 generic mana, and you will get to pick 1 out of 3 options. You can either destroy target artifact, target enchantment, or you get to draw a card and put a land card straight from your hand onto the battlefield. So it either allows you to deal with any problematic things on the battlefield like an aura shards, heuristic studies, a smothering tide, or when you don't need the effect you can use it as a free growth spiral, replacing itself and giving you an additional land drop. Assassin's Trophy. For 2 mana on instant speed you get to destroy any target permanent, meaning you can use this effect to deal with just about anything. Creatures, lands, enchantments, planeswalkers, whatever. But in return that opponent will get to search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield. Now honestly paying 2 mana to deal with anything on instant speed even though you're giving them a basic is a really solid deal. And nowadays most decks are barely running any basic lands, and whenever they don't have basics in their deck anymore, you will just get to blow something up for free. Abrupt Decay, another 2 mana instant speed removal spell that you can target at any non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less, and the best part about this card is the fact that it can't be countered. Now assuming you made it this far into this Teval video, I do assume you are playing in some really high powered pots, where a ton of really low cost efficient value creatures are being played, and where opponents do have access to some really efficient counter magic. And a fun fact that Hoger pointed out to me about Abrupt Decay is the fact that it doesn't care about ward. Let's say your opponents control a Recursion Self-Mill, which is ward 2, you can just cast an Abrupt Decay, the ward ability will try to counter Abrupt Decay, but the spell says it can be countered, so it doesn't actually care about the ward mechanic. The Meat Hook Massacre. For 2 black mana plus X you get a legendary enchantment that whenever it enters the battlefield will give all creatures -X until the end of turn. And this effect functions as some sort of a board wipe. Even after the -X effect resolved, this card will stay on the battlefield as an enchantment, and it does have 2 passive abilities. Whenever a creature you controls would die, each opponent will lose 1 life, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you get to gain 1 life. Now first up, whenever you do manage to cast a spell and actually clear the board of like 10 creatures, you will get to gain a huge amount of life and deal a ton of damage from this effect. This is by far one of the strongest cards ever printed in my opinion, and I seriously don't understand why more people aren't playing it. Toxic Deluge, a 3 mana spell that allows you to pay X life whenever you cast it, and then each creature will get -X equal to the amount of life you just paid. And this is just one of the most efficient board wipes you'll ever get. Its mana cost will always be 3, and you can just choose the value by paying life. And like I mentioned before, you will always have a huge amount of resource to work with in a game of Commander. If you're playing against a goblin player, you can just cast a spell, pay 1 life, and all their 1/1 goblins will be removed from the battlefield. And later in the game, if an opponent controls like huge 10/10 Eldrazi tokens, just invest more life and you will still be able to clear the board. Here's Guardianship, a 3 mana spell that allows us to counter any non-creature spell, but whenever we do have our commander on the battlefield, we actually get to cast this spell for free. As I mentioned in all my videos, all the cards that cost 0 mana whenever you control your commander are absolutely broken and should be banned in the format. That being said, this card is just way too good not to include in the deck, because it is essentially a 0 mana negate. You can just tap out all of your mana, make your plays, and you will still have a way to protect your board. Culling Ritual. For 4 mana you get a spell that will destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, and for every permanent destroyed this way you get to add any combination of green and black mana to your mana pool. It will deal with any low cost value creature like Esper Sentinels, it will just shut down the strategy of any token player, and it forces your opponents to immediately sacrifice all their treasure and clue tokens. And obviously this card will also destroy all the zombie tokens you generated with Teval, but you will get a gazillion mana in return, which you can then use to just pump into some of the biggest spells in this deck and take over the game with. Lethal Scheme, a 4 mana instant speed spell with the Convoke mechanic, meaning whenever you cast it you can tap any creature you control to reduce the mana cost of the spell by 1 mana. And since the zombie druid tokens that Teval generates are actually black creatures, you will even be able to pay for the black mana pips in this spell. Whenever you then cast it, you get to destroy target creature or planeswalker, acting as a really solid removal spell, and then each creature that you use to convoke this spell will get to connive, meaning you will get to draw a card and then discard a card. Another fantastic way to just keep filling your graveyard. And this spell has a really cool interaction with the dredge mechanic. Let's say for example you have a Life from the Loam in your graveyard, you use 4 creatures to convoke this spell, you will then get 4 connive triggers. So the first trigger goes on the stack, and instead of drawing a card you actually dredge your Life from the Loam. Life from the Loam will be returned to your hand and you will get to mill 3 cards. Then you will have to discard a card to the connive mechanic and you will discard Life from the Loam. The second trigger you can then just dredge the Life from the Loam again, discard it again, and this way you will get to mill a total of 12 cards thanks to the dredge mechanic. Next up we have the lands. And the lands in this deck aren't just there to generate us mana. Many of them have have powerful utility abilities, enable graveyard recursion, or become completely absurd whenever we can start looping them through our graveyard. This is one of those decks where the land section is one of the most important parts of the entire list. Bojuka Boch. Whenever this land enters the battlefield, we get to exile target player's graveyard. Nowadays in modern day Magic, a ton of decks are relying on using their graveyard. Be it a landfall deck like this one, a reanimator deck, a spellslinger deck that wants to flashback their spells, and you really should run graveyard hate cards like a Bojuka Boch in any of your decks, because exiling someone's graveyard might actually lock them out of the game. And especially in this deck because we easily are able to go tutor it up whenever we need it. Boseiju Who Endures. A legendary land that won't even enter the battlefield tapped, and it does have the channel ability. So whenever this land card is in our hand, we get the option to pay 2 mana, discard this card, and we get to destroy any target non-basic land, artifact or enchantment on the battlefield, giving us a really solid way to deal with any problem on the battlefield. And thanks to all of the land recursion we are playing in this deck, we will just be able to get it back from our graveyard anyways. And since channel is actually an activated ability, your opponents won't even be able to use any counter magic to stop this effect from happening. Deckmore Salvage, a land with the Dredge 2 mechanic, meaning we can use it over the course of the game to just replace our draws and turn it into self-mill, and we also use this land in one of our infinite combos. Festering Gulch. Whenever this land enters the battlefield, it will deal 1 damage to target opponent. Now this land might seem pretty weird, but in this deck we do play a combo where we can infinitely start looping through our lands, and this land will then turn that loop into infinite damage and an instant game win. Field of the Dead. Whenever this land or any other land enters a battlefield under your control and you do control 7 differently named lands, you will get to generate a 2/2 zombie token. And as you've seen in this video, the amount of lands that will be entering the battlefield under our control, whether be it through fetch lands, graveyard recursion, or even earthbending, will be absolutely insane. Just like the amount of zombies that Field of the Dead will be able to generate us. And since this card gives you a win condition on a land that will eventually take over the game, it might be one of the best lands ever printed. Glacial Chasm. Whenever this land enters a battlefield, you have to sacrifice a land. And it also has a cumulative upkeep, meaning at the beginning of your upkeep, this card will get an H counter, and you will have to pay the upkeep cost for each counter this card has on itself. In this case being paying 2 life. If you don't pay the cost, you do have to sacrifice this land. Now I know, this land does have a ton of downsides, but the passive effect on it is absolutely crazy. For as long as this land is on the battlefield, you get to prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. And thanks to all the graveyard recursion we are playing in this deck, we will never have to care about the upkeep cost. Because at the beginning of our turn, we can just choose to not pay the upkeep cost, make it go to our graveyard, and we do play like 7 gazillion ways to return it to the battlefield anyways. And this card does create some sort of a soft lock for your opponents if they do rely on dealing combat damage. Because if you have any card that allows you to replay lands from your graveyard, like an Ice Still Explorer or a Walking Closet, you can just sacrifice this at your upkeep and replay it from your graveyard every single turn, and your opponents will never ever be able to win against you. Golgari Rot Farm. Whenever this land enters a battlefield, you have to return another land you control to your hand. Now usually bounce lands do really ruin your tempo, but since we do play a ton of the channel lands in this deck and things like a Bojuka Boch, we can just bounce all of our utility lands back to our hand, we get to play them again, and we get an additional use out of their effect. Lazotep Quarry. For 2 generic mana, plus X, tapping and sacrificing this land, we get to exile target creature with mana value X from our graveyard, and we get to create a 4/4 zombie token copy out of that card, which is a fantastic way to just recur any sort of value ETB creature from your graveyard. You can use it to get a Crater Hoof Behemoth trigger, get a copy of your Gitrog monster, or when you don't have any reanimation cards left in your deck, you can even use it to get your Colossal Grave Reaver back if you do have the mana for it. Lotus Field. Whenever this land enters a battlefield, you will have to sacrifice 2 lands. But in return, you will get a land with the hexproof mechanic, making it really hard to interact with, and it's a land that will tap for 3 mana. Like I already mentioned, it has a really good synergy with Steward of the Harvest, and the sacrificing lands parts can be really good whenever you have a Gitrog monster on the battlefield. And we will be able to just recur the sacrificed lands anyways. Otawara, Soaring City. For 4 mana and discarding this land, we get to bounce either target creature, artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. Another really good utility channel land that we can use later in the game to deal with any problematic permanent on the battlefield. Shifting Woodland, a land that you can activate for 4 mana to turn into a copy of any permanent card in your graveyard. But you can only activate this ability if you do have the Delirium mechanic active, meaning you need more than 4 card types in your graveyard. Card types being things like creature, planeswalker, enchantment, land, whatever. And the amount of applications that a Shifting Woodland has in this deck is absolutely crazy. If someone is casting a board wipe and a ton of creatures are about to die, you can just use its ability to turn into a copy of the Meathook Massacre and get a huge amount of value. You can turn it into a copy of your Colossal Grave Reaver if you are about to mill yourself to just reanimate a huge amount of creatures. If you are planning to cheat a ton of lands into play, you can turn it into a copy of Aesi, just drawing you a gazillion cards. You can even turn it into a copy of Head Shredder if you are about to mill yourself to just cheat a ton of lands into play, and it is obviously also used as a really vital combo piece. Strip Mine and Wasteland. Both are lands that will tap for a colorless mana, and you can tap and sacrifice them to destroy any land on the battlefield, or in the case of Wasteland, you can only target non-basic lands. Now, since we are a land recursion deck, we are easily able to just keep bringing back these cards and use them over and over again to just keep destroying our opponent's lands. And as I already mentioned, they do have a really crazy synergy with Steward of the Harvest. Just exile one of these lands and all your zombies will get the ability that you can tap them to destroy lands. And cards like this have an insane synergy with Ice Still Explorer. You can just play your Strip Mine, tap it, destroy a land. You can just replay it from your graveyard thanks to the Ice Still Explorer, tap it again and destroy another land. And over the course of the game, you will just be able to cripple your opponent's land bases. Takenuma, Abandoned Mire, the Black Channel land. For 4 mana and discarding this land, you get to mill 3 cards. Then you get to return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. A fantastic recursion tool that you can use to get whatever creature you need back to your hand, and it will give you a Teval trigger. Talon Gates of Madara. Whenever this land enters a battlefield, you get to pick 1 creature on the battlefield and it phases out, meaning it won't exist until its controller's next upkeep. And this land can be used both offensively and defensively. If an opponent has a key value creature on the battlefield, you can just play your Talon Gates, phase it out, and it won't be a problem until your next turn. Or you can use this land's effect to just phase out Teval or any of your other value creatures, because whenever they phase out, they won't exist until your next upkeep and your opponents won't have any way to interact with them. And for 4 generic mana, this land has an ability you can activate from your hand to just put it on the battlefield, so you actually get to phase something out on instant speed, which is an absolutely insane thing to do. And for the regular mana producing lands in this deck, we play 5 of the fetch lands, which as I mentioned throughout the video have some crazy synergies with anything we do in this deck. 3 shock lands, 2 survey lands, 1 bond land, a triome, a Plaza of Heroes, a command tower, a starting town, a nurturing peatland, a mana confluence, a Yavimaya, and for basics we play 1 regular forest, 1 snow covered forest, because these 2 cards actually count as different card names for Field of the Dead, 1 island, and 1 swamp. And finally, let's talk about the combos. I will be showing you all of the combos in this deck visually, so you do get a good idea of how they work in practice. If you would like the full picture of how exactly all these combos work and you want to go through it at your own pace, I'd highly recommend checking out the primer. The link is in the description below. For the first combo, you will need 3 things on the battlefield: a Gravecrawler, a Phyrexian Altar, and a random zombie creature. You start this combo by activating your Phyrexian Altar by sacrificing your Gravecrawler. This will add 1 black mana to your mana pool, and then you will use that black mana to recast the Gravecrawler from your graveyard because you do control another zombie. And that's it. That's the entire loop, because you can just keep repeating this process forever. If you do have Teval on the battlefield, this combo will generate you an infinite amount of 2/2 zombie tokens, because the Gravecrawler just keeps leaving your graveyard and and triggering Teval. And if you do have a card like the Meathook Massacre or Ayara on the battlefield, this combo will just drain out the entire table at once. For the next combo, you will need a Kiru Goldkeeper on the battlefield, a Gravecrawler in your graveyard, an Altar of Dementia on the battlefield, and you will need another zombie under your control. You start this combo off by recasting Gravecrawler from your graveyard. The Kiru Goldkeeper will then trigger and it will generate you a treasure token. You can then activate Altar of Dementia, sacrificing the Gravecrawler, and you will be able to mill one of your opponents for 2 cards. You can then sacrifice the treasure token you just generated to add 1 black mana to your mana pool, and then you can use that mana to just recast the Gravecrawler and start the loop all over again. And this combo will result in an instant game win because you will just be able to mill out all of your opponents. There are a couple of other variations on this combo, but those are explained in the primer over on Moxfield. For the next combo, you will need a Gitrog monster on the battlefield, a Dagmar Salvage in your hand, and you will have to have at least 1 more card in your hand than your maximum hand size. And you actually start this combo off by just ending your turn. You will then go to the cleanup step and you will have more cards in your hand than you're allowed to, and you will have to discard down to hand size. You then decide to discard the Dagmar Salvage, and since a land just entered your graveyard, you will get a Gitrog monster trigger, allowing you to draw a card. But since Dagmar Salvage is in our graveyard, we will actually replace the draw effect by dredging 2. This will allow us to mill 2 cards and return the Dagmar Salvage to our hand. Then we will still be in our cleanup step and have 8 cards in our hand again, forcing us to discard again. And from here on out, we can just keep dredging the Dagmar Salvage to put our entire library into our graveyard. And whenever your entire library is in your graveyard, you can either reanimate your Laboratory Maniac, or you can just recur your Shifting Woodland and turn it into a copy of Lab Maniac to just win the game whenever you draw your next card. For the next combo, you will need Kiru Goldkeeper on the battlefield, a Tortured Existence, a token engine like Teval or Insidious Roots, a creature card in your hand, and a creature card in your graveyard. You start this combo off by paying 1 black mana and activating Tortured Existence. You will then have to discard a creature card and return another creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Since the card just left your graveyard, Teval will trigger and generate you a 2/2 zombie token. You will then also get a Kiru Goldkeeper trigger and you will get to generate a treasure token. Then you will be able to sacrifice the treasure token to add 1 black mana to your mana pool, activate Tortured Existence again, and you can keep the loop going from here. And this will generate you an infinite amount of zombie tokens. Next up, we have the classic Aftermath Analyst combo. You will need Shifting Woodland on the battlefield, an Aftermath Analyst in your graveyard, a Sylvan Safekeeper on the battlefield, an Amulet of Vigor on the battlefield, and you will need at least 8 lands that are able to produce you mana. You start this combo off by tapping all of your lands to generate you 8 mana. Then you activate your Sylvan Safekeeper by sacrificing all of your lands but the Shifting Woodland. You then use 4 of your mana to activate Shifting Woodland's ability and turn it into a copy of Aftermath Analyst. Then you use your last 4 mana to activate the copy of Aftermath Analyst, sacrificing it and returning all of your lands to the battlefield. Thanks to Amulet of Vigor, all of these lands will untap themselves and you will be able to just tap them again for 8 mana and keep the loop going. And you can use this loop to win the game in many ways. Since you keep sacrificing your Aftermath Analyst, the Meathook Massacre will turn this into a game win. If you do have a Hedron Crab on the battlefield, you will just mill out your opponents. If you have any sort of survey land amongst your 8 lands, you will always be able to mill 1 more every time you go through the loop, and you will be able to put your entire deck into your graveyard. And eventually you will then hit your Festering Gulch, which you can just keep recurring over and over again, and you can ping down the entire table. And obviously I also included an infinite combo using Earthbending. You will need a Bifong's Bounty Hunters on the field, a Bloodghast on the field, and an Altar of Dementia on the field. You start this combo off by sacrificing your Bloodghast to your Altar of Dementia, milling a player for 2 cards. Bifong Bounty Hunters will then trigger and you will be able to Earthband 1 of your lands. You can then sacrifice the Earthband land to Altar of Dementia, and thanks to the Earthbending, the land will instantly return to the battlefield tapped. This will then trigger the Bloodghast in your graveyard, also returning it to the battlefield. And from that point you can just keep repeating the loop, milling out all of your opponents and ending up with an instant game win. Or instead of using Bloodghost for this combo, you can also use Teval. Because now whenever you sacrifice the Earthbent land, it will hit your graveyard, then return to the battlefield, which will trigger Teval and generate you a zombie token, which you can then sacrifice. By functional trigger, you will get to Earthbent the land again, sacrifice the Earthbent land, and just keep repeating the loop from there. This combo section was really long, and if I did make any mistakes in the video, I can assure you that all the combos in the primer are explained correctly. And if you do manage to find any mistakes, just point them out to me and I will change them in the primer. And that's it for my in-depth take on Teval the Balanced Scale. Teval turns your entire graveyard into a resource you can use, making this deck an incredible amount of fun to play. Every game will play out a little different, but the deck always feels really powerful and rewarding if you sequence it well, which is exactly what I'm looking for in any commander. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, let me know by commenting a zombie emoji. Share this video with your entire family, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon. Thanks for being a part of what was a really life-changing year for me, and I will see you in the next one.